All right,
Uh,
perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, Nathan Tankus in the building. Hello.
Hi. Well, today's the day. Today's the crazy day.
Yeah, I've been cribbing your famous tweet about being a leftist is just about being right but too early over and over again, and I'm happy to finally have you on the broadcast. Great recommendations from my friend Noah Colwyn, but more importantly, my friend Paul Krugman. As a leftist and an analyst and an investigative reporter, you are, it seems, Paul Krugman's favorite, and he is a friend of the show. We love him around these parts. Nobel laureate, prize winning economist Paul Krugman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fake Nobel, but still, yeah, even still.
All right. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on. So let's get started. Let's address the elephant in the room. What the fuck's going on? The markets are recovering. They're rebounding. Yesterday they were falling apart. Lots of green today. Lots of red yesterday. Is this fake? Is money fake?
Money's not fake, but it is fragile, and it's a lot more fragile than people sometimes think it is. And certainly, apparently, the people who have been put at the top of the federal government do not understand how fragile it is. There's so much details that we can go through. From my point of view, this is the 69th day of the Trump-Musk payments crisis. Originally, the Trump-Musk Treasury payments crisis, but after some other stuff about New York City, we can maybe get to later. I've just been calling it the Trump-Musk payments crisis, and I've done 21 pieces, all kind of long and involved in the last 69 days, and so there's a lot of detail. But the big picture, I would say, is the terror, the fear, the instability, and the emotional turmoil that people experience, having gone in the first Trump administration, but then really with the second Trump administration and these wild moves, disappearing people for pro-Palestinian speech, disappearing people because they're allegedly part of a gang when they actually have just a tattoo honoring their autistic brother. Like, all that sort of fear and instability that millions and millions of Americans and people around the world have been feeling about the second Trump administration, Wall Street and the stock market was mostly indifferent to. The stock market kept doing well in crazy news. A constitutional crisis, a foundational, snatching the power of the purse from Congress. We can talk about what that means later, but like these foundational, fundamental things, 1,000 different crazy stories, and the stock market just sort of kind of sailed on. And then it was only as Doomsday, or as Trump says, Liberation Day, started approaching that conversations about tariffs and, oh, wait, maybe they're actually serious about this, started bubbling up. But for the most part, they've been able to hold strong, believe the Fed will figure it out, or, they'll back off. There's all these business schools that are in charge, that are actually in charge, and everything's going to be fine. They have been able to just sort of have a calm, lackadaisical outlook. These are the people who were so confident that Trump getting elected would be good for the stock market, that not only did they think it would be good for the stock market, they thought it would be so much better for the stock market that in advance of Trump getting elected for the second time, the stock market started just trading on the perceived odds of Trump winning. So the odds of Trump winning going up, and we know that because the stock market is up. So it's not just that they thought the stock market would do well; they thought it would do so much better than it would do under Biden, because I don't know, business guys are a dominant right wing mood and opinion throughout the financial elites of our society, the increasingly influential financial technology or fintech elites of our society, and they were riding high, and Trump finally did something that could make them understand who he is. And what the stock market has been doing for the past 5 days, 6 days, however you want to put on it, what the stock market has been doing is finally trading the way ordinary Americans have emotionally felt about Trump news. Oh, a good sign. Oh, maybe things a little bit better. I'm looking for any sign of hope. Oh, terrible news. I'm desolate. And that emotional turmoil is now what the stock market trades on. And there's literally an index of volatility. It's in the financial product that they trade like any other, or products that are linked to this index.
VIX, right?
The VIX, yeah, the VIX, and the VIX is essentially has just become a measure of how freaked out and how uncertain Trump is making them feel. And the VIX blew out for the last 5 days. It's doing a little better now because of the latest news. We'll get to that. But the big picture is Wall Street is finally having the experience of Trump that everyone else is having. That's what's happened now. Wall Street is finally experiencing Trump the way we all, and they don't like it one bit because it involves 16 hours for them. It involves 16 hours a day, and the disappearing and reappearing of trillions of dollars of wealth in a matter of minutes, including over fake tweets that get picked up in the media and run for 15 minutes like it did Monday. And it's literally created, and that's just the US stock market. I mean, 20, 30, 40 more trillions of dollars of volatility, of value, monetary value appearing and then disappearing, move on any sign of what is going on between Trump's 2 ears. And they don't like it. And so this is Trump couldn't help but touch the stove. He just couldn't do it. He was doing so well at destroying so many things without getting a sufficient reaction, cowering elite law firms, all of this. And he did such a good job of really doing a real success at walking through American institutions, but he couldn't leave well enough alone. He had to touch the stove. He had to believe in his big, beautiful tariffs. And now Wall Street is finally living in the world that we all live in.
Yeah. But aside from the instability, I mean, the reason why I say money is so fake is partially because of the initial rebound that we saw with the fake tweet that then turned out to be Trump policy later down the line, regardless. And the rebound that we're seeing is a consequence of that as well. Whereas the instability still remains, as you mentioned. And not only does the instability still remain, but also a lot of these tariffs still remain. 10% universal tariffs slapped onto every single good is a broad sales tax that will drive up prices across the board. It's a regressive tax. It is going to make it more costly for the working class regardless. And on top of that, Donald Trump seemingly has implemented a de facto trade embargo on our largest trading partner. So the fact that the markets are still in the green because there is a moment of respite from the insane universal application of tariffs to our allies and other trading partners is simply not enough. I think the market is reacting in a way where they're saying, okay, he's not that crazy, but what remains is the truth that what he did is still an insane move that will drive up prices and also destroy certain sectors regardless that still rely on Chinese goods. It's not just like Temu and Shein. There's still plenty of stuff that's manufactured in China that the American economy relies on. Am I incorrect in this assessment?
None of that is wrong, but you're thinking in the time horizon of the potential economic impacts over months or years. That's not where we're at. Wall Street is now thinking in terms of minutes and hours.
Yeah, I mean that to me is insane.
But it's not insane though, because for what's going to happen months from now to matter, you have to make your payments. You have to meet your obligations today. And the volatility, VIX, blowing out so much is immediately an existential thing for certainly every non-bank financial firm on Wall Street. And like if if VIX had gone, if volatility had gone up 10 or 20% more than it did, and there was no relief at all at any point of this day, many firms would have failed.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're talking about. Like we're talking, and this is why I talked about today was the Lehman in my piece to this morning, that today is the Lehman Brothers moment, comparing it to September 15th, 2008.
Oh yeah.
There were positive moments that came on subsequent to that. But it was still months of calamity, and everyone on Wall Street knew definitively, okay, this is not something that's going away. It's here to stay. And that's what today was. And so, there are complex, it's not just like one person or a few people trading. They are institutions. And they're the big picture is a lot of our institutions, for various sort of complicated, you can read my piece from today on it, financial regulatory issues coming into this crisis post 2008, ways that the financial regulators tried to fix things that were inept, that didn't work post 2008, left a set of vulnerabilities that were papered over by hedge funds. So we need someone to buy a ton of treasury securities. Well, the hedge funds are going to do that. They're going to leverage up, which basically just means they're going to have a whole bunch of liabilities against their net worth, their assets minus their liabilities. And they're going to have when you lever up, you can have a big balance sheet with not that much net worth. And so you can hold hundreds of billions or maybe even $1 trillion treasuries, whatever it is. And across however many hedge funds, you can absorb what's out there. And so liquidity, a certain level of stability in our system, because we didn't build anything better, or more specifically, because financial regulators, central bankers, whatever, didn't build anything better. They thought it was too politically difficult to get through building what needed to be done. They just sort of tried to paper over with what is. Hedge funds became increasingly, and high frequency traders and all this became increasingly essential to our financial system, specifically in the last 15 years. And what that means is that when volatility goes up a whole bunch, they've got these risk models that tell them, oh, look, volatility is a bunch. You're only supposed to be taking this much risk with this much net worth, with this much assets minus liabilities. So you gotta get rid of a bunch of risk. You have to pay down your debts. And so they go selling assets to pay down their debts, causes a whole bunch of problems. They also are trying to sell the assets that won't go down, that they think will go down the least, sort of treasuries. So that's why, even though this is normally in a crisis, there's a flight to safety, a flight to treasuries. Why it's not happening now is because our financial system is increasingly relied on hedge funds. They were treating treasuries as cash. Now they're not. Now that was looking kind of wobbly, and so the Federal Reserve is going to have to step in and buy a whole bunch of treasuries. But it doesn't really solve the problem, because the fundamental problem is not the treasury market. The fundamental problem is Donald Trump is Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump, the market is just trading on quote unquote what you might call hyper fundamentals. But the only fundamental, the only sort of determining whether there's economic value going to be out there or not, Donald Trump, and it's what he's saying minute to minute, and that's inherently unstable. And Wall Street can't operate on this level of instability. Wall Street, if there's too little instability, if there's too little volatility, there's no profit to be made because you can't trade. There's no volatility to trade on. Trading profits are up for the big banks, but they're losing on everything else besides trading. But on the other side, if there's too much volatility, the system can't function. It buckles. And so that's when everything's supposed to fit in. And normally what would happen, like what happened in 2020, like what happened in 2008, central banks would step in 2020, some with fiscal policy would step in to stabilize things while trying to still deal with the structural problems. The Federal Reserve didn't make supply chain issues go away. What it did was stabilize the financial system so you could start thinking about these longer term economic problems. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, how do you have central banks stabilize the financial system when the thing destabilizing it is not a pandemic? It's not just inherently some financial issues on Wall Street, but it is the president of the United States doing insane illegal things every day and basically threatening to blow up the world. Like he put in 104% tariffs on China today. Like that's what came in at midnight. And what do you do with that? Like there's just nothing you can do. And they're trying appeasement. They're trying all these things. But ultimately, now Wall Street is in the situation where Trump having the reins, Trump being in control, is inconsistent with them having a viable business model. And so the question is the business model of Wall Street going to go, or is Trump going to go? Or is Trump going to be mollified or like neutered in some way that can get the instability down sufficiently that things will be okay? VIX is down now, but it's still very elevated. This is not going away under, Trump just saying, there's a 90-day relief or whatever.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It seems like he's still doing the old Trump initiative of like he gets a boss call from Jamie Dimon, or he sees some numbers not moving in the direction that he thought it would, and he gets a little scared and at least backs away for a little bit to offer temporary relief. So if that's any indication of how he's going to operate, then there's definitely more. I mean, he'll still make inferences to instability, but he'll ultimately still back down when pushed by Wall Street. But I want to talk about the larger scale project here.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. He's not gonna he's backing down now, but like under the scale of Wall Street and how Wall Street thinks, Trump should have backed down over the weekend. And so Trump backing down only this afternoon is insane to them. And so, a lot of people, including people who backed him for president quite prominently, are now thinking in the back of they are basically lost all confidence in him. I think they had confidence in him. It's so mind-boggling you can't really wrap your head around it. But they've actually lost confidence in him this week, and it's precisely because he doesn't respect the rules of the game. The rule of the game of you're supposed to, as Joe Weisenthal from Bloomberg, wrote very presciently about in November of last year after Trump won, he doesn't respect the stock market vigilantes. That was the phrase from Joe. And the stock market vigilantes are supposed to be what disciplines him, and Trump doesn't respect that. And it seems like the amount of pressure, the amount of behind the scenes cajoling and arguing, and just pressure just from the behavior of the stock market to get Trump to back down to the extent that he's backed down. And as you're pointing out, he has not fully backed down. Like the stock market is up today just because it's better than the situation before he backed down. And then there's some glimmer of hope that maybe he'll back down further, and that's getting priced in a little bit. But things are so erratic that it's hard to think that really there's any sort of information being or conventional wisdom being priced in much at all. It's just frantic trading up down. We could go in tomorrow and the stock market could crash 6% on some new news overnight from Trump or some new thinking or whatever. The crisis from Wall Street's point of view is precisely that Trump has shown that he will not kowtow to the stock market vigilantes. And the combination of you won't kowtow to the stock market vigilantes and you're going to cause so much instability that if the instability above a certain point, which they very could easily hit over the next week, that a number of firms are just going to straight up fail. Dozen Lehman Brothers, then that's an existential question for them that then becomes an existential question for Trump.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about a grand design here, because I do believe that in spite of all the chaos and instability, there is a method to the madness in terms of America moving in the direction of global trade. I think it's still a failure, and it will inevitably yield an economic collapse. But I think that the things that the Trump administration has signaled that they're interested in doing in terms of decoupling the United States from our largest trading partner and potentially devaluing the dollar on the global stage. The 5-point plan, basically, that was presented by like what our foreign adversaries and foreign allies alike must do, I think is the reason as to why he's wielding these tariffs as a weapon. It has nothing to do with tariffs at all. Tariffs is just simply the point of contention. It's just the entry point into the conversation where it's more so the weapon he's wielding to break global trade, if you will, in an effort to advance what he believes is the underlying change in global trade across the board, where America becomes more of a manufacturing hub and develops its manufacturing output and moves away from reliance on or over reliance on China. And in the process, obviously, you need to devalue the American currency. This is the Yanis Varoufakis analysis on the matter. And I think I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't think they're going to be successful, but I think that is what they're trying to do. And they're trying to do that without any sort of initiative to build a base of manufacturing, to build the infrastructure necessary, and simply assuming that this can happen overnight, or this can happen without any sort of serious investment from the public sector, and by bullying foreign capital and supranational capital class to come back to the United States and just like dump boatloads of money instead of just waiting out the storm and the volatility. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I do think it's true that a ton of the most powerful, richest people in the Trump orbit, including Trump himself, are rabidly anti-China. I don't think there's any method in the madness. I think it's just madness. I think if I had one message to like other leftists, is you need to lose the remaining confidence you have in the American ruling class. And I know many people are going to hear that and go, what do you mean? I don't have any confidence in the American ruling class. If you believe there's a method in the madness, then you still have touchingly naive confidence in the American ruling class. There's just madness. November 2024, if I would ask you, son, November 2024, what you thought that the top concern, the top global problem that American financial elites predominantly believed existed in the world, and including, Silicon Valley tech, what the dominant problem in November 2024 was, what would you say?
In November 2024, what the number one concern was?
Number one problem, like the number one big picture problem in the world.
From America's perspective?
From just generally, their jaundiced elite view of what the biggest world problem there is.
I don't know, immigration, I guess, but I don't agree with that in general, or inflation.
The number one issue is, from their point of view, is falling birth rates. Fertility, falling global birth rates is the number one world problem that they thought we had. And I can tell you, I know this very specifically. Like, I went to a conference the first week, like Chatham House, You Can't Attribute Remarks to Specific People conference, with a lot of very elite people in this society. And overwhelmingly, number one was falling birth rates and, not having enough children, i.e. white children, for replacement of population in the industrialized world, or quote unquote, read Europe and United States, maybe throw Japan in there if they're generous, and AI destroying the world, essentially. They do believe that stuff. Like, you might think, oh, that's just some crazy stuff they sell on TV or on Twitter. They believe that stuff. That's what they thought the two biggest problems in the world were, predominantly. Now, obviously not every single one, but like the conventional wisdom among them, those were the top two problems in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's madness. It's fascism. It's like, so my point is, the reason I bring that up is like, if that's not if in your model of what the American elite thinking, those aren't the top two. And of course, China is part of that, and there's a whole narrative they can connect between the fertility in China, and there's all sorts of interconnections between but the American ruling class has been getting more and more fascist, especially as tech has become more and more prominently involved. Tech got really fascist in the pandemic and reacted really negatively to being challenged in the workplace, and also Lena Khan and challenging mergers. Like I'm dead serious. And also Gary Gensler regulating crypto too much. I'm not kidding. Like they became convinced of like Heritage Foundation and Cato Institute narratives about the evil administrative state from those things happening, and then those narratives made sense to them in a way that didn't, plus making themselves fascist on things like Twitter. And then they became convinced, oh yeah, the thing we need to do is to cut to the bone. We need the evil thing is the administrative state, and we need to get rid of it. And that's Doge, that's payments impoundment, that's firing everyone. That's the through line of everything. Pandemic because you're getting challenged by those annoying DEI employees who have too much power because they actually have skills, and at the same time, the evil Biden administration is too leftist and anti-corporate. Really, this is what they think, and goes after your mergers and everything. There must be this evil administrative state that we need to dismantle and get out of our way, and we'll unleash growth in America. Like this really is how these people think. They are that out to lunch. There is no method.
I understand that. They're stupid, and they believe their own lies in general. That much I know. I mean, I've been around rich people. I know how stupid they can get, and also Elon Musk himself, I think, is a pretty great, pretty public version of that, where you have the wealthiest person on the planet describing exactly the things that you're talking about and demonstrating his stupidity on a daily basis. My perspective on this is that, like, governments in general might be motivated by the elite and the interests of the elite. Of course they are, but ultimately governments in general still have long-term plans. Even the American government, which is seemingly more and more focused on the short-term profit motive and defending it to the best of its ability, still has long-term trade plans in general. And I think that this is a long-standing policy of not necessarily. I don't even think trade protectionism is the appropriate way to describe this, because there is no manufacturing base that you are defending in this process, and there is also no interest in boosting manufacturing for the sake of labor in general, but instead it's simply to preserve manufacturing with the fear that I think China might any day, in the aftermath of COVID, when we saw what happened with our supply chains. I think that there is a real fear in the Western world that China does not play by the rules in terms of global trade. This is something that they repeat and reiterate over and over again. And what they actually mean is that China has a command economy and are subsidizing their output far too much and making it impossible to compete against, and destroying domestic manufacturing in specific European countries and also in America as well. And those are the things that they do complain about. Like Ursula von der Leyen a year ago came out and complained about Chinese electric vehicles entering the European market, making it impossible for EU car manufacturers to compete with said Chinese vehicles, because they were, in their words, cheating. They were not playing by the rules designed by the World Trade Organization. They were not playing by the rules. They were not abiding by the rules because they were subsidizing too much, right? I think that this is a real fear that the Western world has, but specifically the United States of America has, because since Deng Xiaoping, it seems as though China has played by the global capitalist order and has beaten Western powers in their own game by offering the treats and the consumable goods at a low price point, and in the process been able to develop itself into a competitive superpower, if not one that is more powerful than America. So the goal here, I do think, since the Obama era especially, is moving in the direction of trying to undermine trying to undermine, or at the very least, like reduce our over reliance on Chinese manufacturing. And I think COVID accelerated those fears quite a bit when they noticed that if supply chains are broken, then America could be completely deadlocked. And I think that is what I do think that is what Trump is trying to do. It's just not. He's going about it in this belligerent manner, and also simultaneously will fail because there is no competitive building of the manufacturing base. You don't think that that's correct? You think that all they care about is like birth rates in general? It's not Trump himself, by the way. I'm saying like these are advisors.
I don't know. I meant the wider. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is generally, like, I would say it's basically an accurate description of the state of play, bipartisan American ruling class. Let's call it roughly 2013 to 2019. And that one of the things that Trump, and then also the Biden administration itself, and that one of the things that Trump getting elected did was a lot of people in the American elite became convinced that it wasn't enough to do kind of military saber rattling with China, that they actually had to do the economic part. And so the Biden administration definitely reflects that dominant instinct, and that a lot of the things that were sold as progressive economic policies were really, like, from their perspective or from the perspective of a lot of elites who were willing to back it, was from an anti-China perspective. Okay, we'll do protections, we'll do chips, we'll do the Inflation Reduction Act, green energy stuff. I think that, it's true about 2013 to 2019, and it's true about the Biden administration, predominantly. But I do not think it's true about the post-January 6th Republican Party. I think, and especially the second Trump administration, the last 2.5 months. Essentially what has happened is that the kind of existing long-term strategizing elites have been increasingly pushed out, and tons of those people have just been straight up fired the last 70 days. And the ones that haven't are kind of in the sidelines, ducking and covering. And that fundamentally that elite didn't prepare for this moment. That elite didn't think about what if Trump tries to implement his agenda, or Musk tries to implement his agenda by getting direct control of the Treasury's internal payment system and being able to directly pick and choose who gets what payments. The CIA's black budget runs through the Bureau of the Fiscal Service at Treasury, and there's no sign at all of any sort of deep state intelligence service, whatever, making a peep about letting a 25-year-old former SpaceX employee, Marco Alez, bounce around the Bureau of Fiscal Service with full access to their systems, knowing that the data could be downloaded and you could analyze it and figure out the location and identities of every spy America's paying around the world. They haven't made a peep about that. They haven't stepped up about that issue at all. Of course, this may be someone murmured by the scenes, but like tons of the CIA is getting pink slipped. Like the FBI is getting, they had no plan for Trump not respecting the rule of law at all. And no one has gotten us off the on-ramp of the imperial presidency. So the people who, and then at the same time, people who are Trump's inner circle are predominantly people who are new to the elite. They're people who became billionaires or got rich or multi-millionaires, whatever, in the last, in the very recent history of American elites. And they've, as we were talking about, brainwashed themselves in Silicon Valley, especially the last few years, with X and all being on X and feeding themselves fascist bile.
So are you saying that like
I think all of that's dead?
So the method to the madness is just like Curtis Yarvin style, nouveau riche, complete takeover of every federal apparatus and rebuilding it in its own vision, and utilizing Donald Trump as like the charismatic force that will allow this to happen. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and what these people discovered, to their great surprise, is they didn't actually control Donald Trump. They thought Donald Trump was bought and paid for somehow. They convinced themselves of this, and Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He is the guy who will say whatever, do whatever. You know, the recent reporting is that Musk has been like desperately trying to get Trump to back off tariffs, and he failed. You know,
Yeah, I mean, he was talking
Trump
shit
will
about
let him
Navarro.
destroy any administrative agency. It will let him destroy any administrative agency, but he can't actually get him not to do the tariffs. And so what these people are discovering, the people who wanted to gut the administrative state and essentially replace the administrative state with Silicon Valley and Palantir and all this shit, and like, you know, end democracy in the United States, they discovered they didn't actually control the figurehead, and the figurehead, as you know, addled as he is still in some sense in charge, and they are now on the wrong side of him blowing up everything. And so that is what's happening in this moment, and that's why, frankly, I am the most relaxed and the happiest I've been and the most optimistic I've been in 69 days, because I saw them taking over and a full fascist takeover without sufficient response, like being very, very much on the table. And now Trump, just because he couldn't help but touch the stove, is threatening that alliance that was doing it. And now everyone, including everyone on Wall Street, understands how dangerous this is to them. And now we're in a very different world where now Trump is an immediate and direct problem for many of the highest level elites in our society and all of Wall Street, or the vast majority of Wall Street. And so, as disastrous and crazy and what it's like looking at the stock market move, I'm so, like, you know, my long-term optimism about, you know, the fight against fascism is the highest it's been in the past 70 days or whatever.
Okay, so why do you think Trump is so gung ho on the tariffs then? Like, what's your assessment of that?
I think, I mean, you know, I'm not going to claim any expertise on what's going on between Trump's ears, but my sense in watching him and reading the full transcript of the National or the Liberation Day speech is that he's increasingly losing it, and he doesn't really understand what the people who are telling him that he needs to back off are saying. And you know, this is a guy who ran for president because he was made fun of by Obama, and at a correspondence dinner. Like, he is an egotistical, venal person, and he finally feels like he can get to do what he wants to do. And he was frustrated about not being allowed to do it, quote unquote, allowed to do it in the first term. And now he's like, no, I'm going to do it this time. And I think he, you know, I mean, the thing is, like, you know, January 6th, like, you know, leftists, we don't focus on them that much, but like, you know, in a very real sense, he did, you know, even if it's quixotic or embarrassing or terrible, did attempt a coup, and he got away with it, and he got elected president again. Like, if you're Trump and the kind of ego that Trump is, of course he believes he's invincible. And
yeah, I mean, he's Teflon Don. He is Teflon Don. He has proven that he's Teflon Don.
Shot at him last year, and he, you know, made through it.
No, but that's not even like, I don't even think it's wrong for him to think that, because all of the institutions have buckled in his presence. So it's not like, of course he's going to feel that way. I do see that. I'm just saying that, like, I think that there are advisors that he has around him. And I do think that he is following through on Project 2025 fairly closely, piece by piece. So that to me still means that there are perhaps different camps within the Trump White House. Like, on the one hand, you have the libertarian, alleged pedophile, psychopathic elite, the Curtis Yarvin branch. But then you also still have, like, the institutional conservatives, or at least, like, those who are close to institutional conservatives, like the Heritage Foundation people that he still listens to. And I do think that Trump's tariff goals still very much align with America's foreign trade agenda overall. even though it'll still obviously be a spectacular failure, both due to the way that Trump is unveiling this and also due to the other institutional hurdles that already existed and will never be fixed. Like the closest we've ever arrived, in my opinion, to implementing something that decouples American trade from China was the CHIPS Act, and that was still stunted within the vision of the Democratic Party that is still a pro-capitalist one, still a neoliberal one, a private-public partnership overall. And Donald Trump himself has also said that the CHIPS Act sucked earlier today. He literally said that the closest that the American government in recent history has arrived at like implementing the vision that Donald Trump seemingly is on board with was actually shitty, was actually bad, was awful. So to me, it feels like there is.
I think that all that's right. I think all that's right. I think the big picture of like the different camps is right, and I think it fits with what I've seen on the Trump-Musk payments crisis and using the payments, weaponizing the payment system against to take over the government and weaponizing it against any political enemy. I think, and the long, broad stroke vision, I think there is like something that's consistent with a longer term vision about the China stuff, but like none of the specifics of the tariff stuff now are any related to it. Like the tariff numbers were literally generated on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And that was, according to the Washington Post reporting, that was Trump picked that over the quote unquote more sophisticated versions 3 hours before going to the Rose Garden.
It wasn't about tariffs or at all. There was no the tariffs very clearly, if you follow what they've been saying, is not real. Even the foreign trade barriers that his advisors set up, that like I think it was like 400-page document that he held up.
Yeah.
Those foreign trade barriers that mean anything from like foreign nations and their own domestic regulatory bodies saying that they don't want salmonella chicken, for example, all the way to, I guess, like what they consider to be currency manipulation. Those weren't even, that was just simply a marketing tool. And the reality of the matter was that this calculation, as they revealed later, was simply around trade deficits. I think that vision is also flawed and stupid. I don't agree with their assessment, especially considering that they're the ones who designed global trade to be this way. And America's power is enforced through the dollar being the reserve currency, and 80% of all transactions happening in the international scale happening with the dollar, which means that we have complete control over all trade that happens, even amongst other foreign nations amongst themselves. But seemingly that there's an interest to like it does feel like there's an interest even by the Trump administration to move, albeit in a belligerent manner, to have some kind of manufacturing capabilities in the States. I don't think they'll be able to pull it off.
I think that's the ideological vision. I think that's like that's been Trump's motivation until when he first conceived of this stuff in the 1980s. But I think as this process has gone on, the train has gone away, and I think for Trump it's about just a pure id, exercise vengeance and power, and like any specifics were like vague idea. Let's do tariffs to develop a domestic manufacturing, sure, but basically the specifics have been completely overridden from that, and the specifics are just purely all this sort of venal power thing. And there are people, including people very close to Trump, who are trying to get him to do things differently, and he's not listening to them. Maybe there's like a couple advisors who are telling him exactly what he wants to hear, but they haven't thought through any of this. They don't understand how, like, for example, like, I watched because I try to watch Fox News because that's what you need to watch if you want to.
I watch a lot. I almost exclusively watch Fox News.
Yeah. So I watched Laura Ingraham last night at 7 p.m. and her whole segment was about saving capitalism and all this stuff, and they're like talking about trade deficits like they just discovered them, and they're like, oh, trade deficits, you'll accumulate, they'll accumulate dollars and they'll be able to buy up, buy up America, and pointing out stuff. And it's like, this was a solved problem from American elites 50 years ago. Where
Oh
literally
yeah.
there's a foreign investment committee. The 50th anniversary is next month. That literally went like, oh, Saudi Arabia, you want to buy out, totally buy out American companies? Nope, you can't do that. You can buy little slices of them, but you can't have any control or any power over American corporations just because you have dollars. Proper ownership, you can buy out a company and control it. That's for us to decide whether you can do it. Like, these kinds of things have been solved problems, and there are other elements of that have made them solve problems. Not least of which is, you get too out of line, we'll freeze your treasury securities like we did after the invasion of Ukraine with Russia. There's all sorts of aspects. I'm going to be writing about them in the next month, where it incredibly favors dollar hegemony, and they don't the sense I have is they don't know very much at all about how these, because this shit is nerd shit. It's nerd shit. Oh, I'm going to learn how something called CFIUS works and its whole history. I don't want to do that. I'm going to learn about the Federal Reserve and the Treasury and all their bureaus. It's nerd shit. And yeah, there's a lot fewer of those nerds bouncing around Trump world than
Absolutely.
some people might imagine.
I do.
And so they literally don't understand how advantaged the US is, and how many different apparatuses, including national security apparatuses, that we have, or that the United States has, to use the dollar in its favor. And so they literally do think we're so disadvantaged, and in the process, they're blowing up all of the United States' advantages.
Yeah. So let's talk about the future play here. What do you predict is going to happen in the short term, in the next couple of months? Specifically in the next 90 days, and then the long-term play here. What do you suspect will happen?
It's these kind of things. We're in a moment like the fall of 2008, and those, that run from September 15th through to, say, late November, December 2008. It's a very tumultuous, unstable, very hard to predict. What I would say is, I suspect that we probably are going to have a lull, at least at a certain phase, a continued lull. We'll have pockets of more instability and more sort of freak out, but we'll have a kind of lull for 10, 11 days. That'll make a lot of people believe that this is going away, and then things will blow up again. But that's just a total speculation guesstimate. That's not something you can kind of rely on. But these kinds of crises are day-to-day things. Once you're in one of these crises, it's very hard to even look out at a horizon of 90 days. So it's going to be a day by day. I've written a piece each day. I've stayed up to 8 a.m. writing a piece every single day this week. I'm probably going to take tomorrow to crash a little bit, and then write a piece on Friday. We'll see. But this is we are in it now. This is not going to, there'll be lulls, and certain people will start pontificating about how everyone just had their hair on fire too much. But yeah, that's the core of it. And
so century of Chinese dominance.
We're just going to be in it.
Century of Chinese dominance and Chinese prosperity.
January 15th, someone paid me to give a talk, and then at the end, someone walked up to me and asked me where I see things in 2050, and my answer, so sort of flippantly, was 40%, complete global economic collapse, 20% Americans hegemony manages to limp on, 25% China, and then miscellaneous for all sorts of other weird combinations for the last 15%. And obviously that was very, very flippant. I guess the numbers now, I would put it much more likely Chinese dominance, much less likely U.S. dominance, and more likelihood of just, total global collapse and regionalization of the world. That's just where Perch looks at this incredibly concerning moment, and that might all seem, I mean, this is all without even thinking about what climate change will be at in 25 years.
Yeah.
So climate change is also not priced in. Like, they're not even pricing in what Trump and Musk are doing in the payment system. They're not pricing in climate change because the stock market wouldn't no financial institution in the world would function if they properly priced in climate change. It's just literally impossible. And so, there's a lot of just sort of no thing will be dominant because there won't be a world system. Is a thing on the chopping block. But outside of that, yeah. I mean, I think it's a longer conversation about China and why all the things that all the reasons that China doesn't want to play that role, and why China has desperately wanted to kind of ride in the sidecar next to dollar hegemony. But obviously Trump is making that seem just completely unworkable on a month-to-month basis, let alone 25 years. So what China does as it tries to figure things out, we'll see. China has a lot of its own problems that are barriers to being that kind of, China doesn't want to become the dominant global currency where it then has to let everyone into their financial market and provide the safe assets to the world, which, providing the safe assets to the world and tight capital controls, they don't go together too well. So that's a much longer, very different conversation. China
Unless the entire global system changes.
Yeah. And those are governance questions. And the thing is, like, the U.S. has basically been running away from the concept of governance at all. And that's why all the wheels are falling off.
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah, no, we're definitely in agreement on that.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, no,
I just wanted to, before we
the future is definitely dire. What's up?
I just wanted to throw in that I have a discount code link for my newsletter.
All right, if you put it in the chat, I'll spam it.
Yeah,
if you put it in the Discord chat. Oh, you did? Okay.
Where do I go for the? I put it in our message between us.
Yeah, I got it. Hold on, I'll spam it in the chat. Right. If you guys want to go read Crisis Notes. Here it is, and with a discount code in and of itself. It's Paul Krugman's favorite newsletter.
Yeah, I would. And also, I'll say it in the chat since I just announced it on Blue Sky a few hours ago that I'm going to have an office. I'm going to have a Manhattan Notes in the Crises office. It's not going to be public, but I'm going to be expanding. I'll do my own video, audio, and maybe even streaming from my office.
Hell yeah.
And all my books behind me. So I'm right in that expansion moment where I'm going to be doing a lot more of the things like you do.
That's great.
I'll need a lot of advice on that too.
Yeah, I'm always here to help out. All right, thanks so much for coming on, Nathan, and I look forward to reading. I look forward to reading more from you. All right.
Yeah. See you soon.
Bye. That was Nathan Tankus, ladies and gentlemen.